Well, good early evening, my friends. Good afternoon to my co host. Good late evening to everybody who joins us over in the European countries. This is episode number 189 of Material Issues. I'm Mark Hershberger of Pop Detective Records over here in actually a balmy South Jersey today. So we hit about 50 degrees. Of course, it was windy enough to take you airborne if you were flying a kite. But how's everything over in Southern California, Mr. David Bash, the president of the International Pop Overthrow Festival? David.
Well, good to see you, Mark, as always. We got a bit of rain over the weekend, which was very helpful to putting out the fires. I imagine. I haven't really been watching the news. I know they've been largely contained. I assume that if anything's still burning, it's not much. Thank God for that.
Indeed.
On a personal level, my recovery from back surgery seems to be going pretty well. The good thing is I don't have those shooting pains down my legs anymore, but I actually have more pain, well, more stiffness in my back, which I need to work out by walking more. Rena and I did a 20-minute walk a few days ago, and it wasn't a problem, thankfully. I mean, in November, when I missed all those IPOs, I could never have done that.
Right.
So things are definitely looking up in that way. Um, let's see what else. I'll do a little watch of the day here. And I like showing this one because, well, this is the homage to the Rolex Explorer 2 by Pagani Design. It looks almost exactly like it, and it functions almost exactly like it, and it's under $100.
At a third of the cost.
I mean, the real Rolex is about $15,000 now.
Yeah.
They've gone up so much every year. But if you want something that looks as snazzy as the real Explorer 2, then this Pagani Design is definitely for you. I also have it in black, but I thought the white face looked really good with what I was wearing now.
Yeah.
A Pagani Design does some really great homages, and like I said, they're really, really inexpensive. So if you want something that looks like a Rolex but isn't, and you don't want to spend more than $100, that's definitely the one.
Tim, how you doing?
Hey, Tim, good to see you as always.
Yeah, got to comment on your patchwork design shirt tonight. It's not your typical paisley, or.
Oh, right, no, it isn't. This is a company called French Crown, and I don't recall exactly, but I probably did order a paisley, but they had a 2-for-1 deal. And this one popped up, and I said, yeah, this looks nice. I'll get it as a free extra. So yeah, I decided to wear it today.
I think it's called the Scarecrow, is what it's called. It's the patchwork, the Scarecrow.
Right.
But it's all good. Now we're having a good week so far. Really looking forward to tonight's show. I think we got some mutual friends involved, and one big mutual friend, which would be the subject of the new book that he has.
I wanted to before we introduce him, I wanted to thank you very much for turning me on to Twinklehead when I did my favorite albums of 2024 a couple of weeks ago. You said, here's one that you missed, and indeed I did. Well, I contacted Henrik, the main guy from the band.
Yes.
And after a little bit of finagling things, we were able to work out that Twinklehead will be coming to IPO Liverpool.
Oh my gosh.
So thank you so much I never would have found them, and likely they never would have found me either, except for you turning me on to them. So maybe you need to come to IPO.
You're going to have to make a trip to IPO Liverpool. I mean, I've loved Twinklehead for, I don't know, 18 years since that first album that they had. It's been a long time.
Wow.
And that's big news.
Yeah, it's really great that worked out. One of the things that helped is they're from Norway, and they were going to fly into London. And I said, well, why don't you fly into Manchester? In fact,
Mhm.
I really need to mention that to everybody because A, it's going to be cheaper for the flight,
Yeah.
and B, it's going to be cheaper and a lot quicker for the train ride from the airport.
Yeah.
A London train ride is about 3 hours and very, very expensive. The Manchester to Liverpool train ride is very, very cheap in comparison. So people really need to fly into Manchester rather than London, but most people don't know about it. So
Right. Yeah.
once I did that, that definitely made coming to Liverpool a little bit more doable for Trinklehead. So there we go.
And he's bringing the full band, huh?
So he says, yeah.
Wow. That's awesome, man. That's big.
So yeah,
That's
thank you very much for that.
outstanding.
We're actually almost full with Liverpool. I actually, when did I start inviting people? Less than a couple of weeks ago, and we have now 101 out of the 110 that we have room for.
Wow.
So,
101 bands already booked. That's
The
fantastic.
Cavern is known as the most famous club in the world, and that's one of the reasons why, because every musician practically, who every pop musician, I should say for sure, wants to play where the Beatles made their name.
Oh, indeed. Oh, indeed. Fantastic. Well, that's really awesome. I'm gonna have to give serious thought to that. Yeah, there's Rick. Good to
Hey
see
Rick, good to see you.
you.
There's a band that needs to come to IPO Liverpool, Athenor.
Yeah.
Or if Rick can put Brevity back together, we'll find a place for them at IPO Liverpool for sure.
Nice. Love it.
But yeah, we could talk about that forever. But let's bring on our guest. Our guest is noted author, and he's written books on several acts, pop acts, rock and roll acts. But the one that he seems to be most renowned for is Solidarity Forever, The Art and Soul of Stevie Van Zandt, which came out a few years ago. And I have to admit, I haven't had a chance to read the whole book, but I've skimmed through it. And he really goes into amazing detail and got answers to questions that a lot of other people weren't able to get when talking to Miami Steve, Little Steven, et cetera, et cetera. So let's bring him on. Would you please give a huge material issues welcome to Mr. Robert Lawson?
And there he is.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Robert. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, looking forward to this.
I got to ask you something right off the bat because I read somewhere that you were once a record store owner. Is that correct?
I work in a record store.
Oh, you worked in a record store. Okay, that's what it was. Do you know a Toronto label man named Jamie Vernon?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Jamie's been a good friend of both of ours for many, many years. His bands have played international pop Overthrow, not just in Toronto, but I mentioned Liverpool. He brought his band out to play at the Cavern for us as well. Unfortunately, he had to sell most of his record collection a few years ago, but he was very philosophical about it. I don't think I would have as positive an outlook if I had to sell mine. You're just looking at in the back of me at a very, very small fraction of what I have. And I can see in the back of you that you have quite a large collection as well. And this is something that doesn't apply to you guys too much, but if you live in LA, here's what I couldn't stand. On Facebook, these were in record collecting groups. People in Facebook were lamenting either losing their own No, it wasn't so much. They were lamenting that somebody else lost their record collection in the recent LA fires. And it was just received with vitriol. People were saying, as if we should be worried about records when, people's lives were lost. And like, isn't that more important? And it's like, of course it's more important. It's not like these people said, I lost my record collection, but was able to save my wife. But if I had it to do over again, I'd have done it the other way around. It wasn't like that. I think it goes without saying that people are the most important. But anyone who posted anything about lamenting losing records just was met with, like I said, so much animus. It was really, Yeah, it was, and these are in record groups, even not just on somebody on their own Facebook page. And yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm thinking about resigning from most of those groups, because there's just there's such hatred and jealousy and everything. But
So
anyway,
Robert, you worked at record stores. You still do?
I still do. I've worked
you
in
still
records.
do. Where do
I
you
work.
work?
I currently manage a Sunrise Records in Etobicoke, which is just outside of Toronto, or it's a part of Toronto. But yeah, I've been working in record stores since 1986.
Wow.
I would say that if we were experiencing that kind of a natural disaster here in Toronto, and I was asked whether I would save my music collection or my wife, I think my response would be, which wife?
There you go.
Good point. Good point. Well, as we said, we have some mutual friends. My good friend Bob Reed is the person that turned me on to you originally. He said you got to check out your book on Cheap Trick and the Guess Who, and then he talked about the Stevie Van Zandt book. So very interested, and I read through the Stevie Van Zandt book, and as David said, boy, there's a lot of information there. You really got pretty much as much information as anybody on the planet, I think, could get on. Hey, Steve.
Steve. Another Canadian band, Star Collector, but they're from the other side of the country in Vancouver.
Yeah. But I got to show you. I know we talk about the cavern and things, but David Bash, my co-host, does have the honor of having a brick on the wall at the Cavern Club. And this picture here, Robert, if you will notice, this is his brick. But look who's right underneath David Bash.
I totally forgot about that in relation to Robert. But yeah. If you happen to speak with Steven at some point, please let him know. He's aware of who I am. We've met, but he doesn't know much about me. But if you happen to speak with him, please let him know that his brick and mine are right next to each other.
That's nice. That's great.
It really was quite an honor, and I'm one of the few non-musicians to ever have a brick on the cavern wall. But we've been doing the festival there for 20 years. And as they said, I brought more than 2,000 acts to the cavern. So they wanted to honor me that way. And yeah, again, it's probably the best honor I'll ever get. First question I have for you is, why did you name him Stevie rather than Steven in the title?
Good question. He requested it. He currently is. That's just that's his preference. We talked about the title. I told him what it was, and that was his only. He liked Solidarity Forever, bringing two song titles together.
Right.
But he wanted to be credited as Stevie, which is the same reason why the new HBO documentary about him, Disciple, is also uses the name Stevie. That's just kind of what he's. So if that's what he wants to be called, then that's what I'm going to call him.
Sure, why not?
Yeah, of course. Before we get really into this book, let's talk about kind of everything else you've done. Your kind of prehistory. Did your first book was the Cheap Trick book or Guess Who?
Actually, my first book was about Nazareth.
Oh, the Razzmatazz was your first book. Okay, I thought that was upcoming. I guess I confused that somewhat. So what got you into writing and wanting to do these books on Nazareth, Cheap Trick, Guess Who, the listener's guide, so to speak?
Well, being probably like you guys and like a lot of your viewers, being a lifelong music kind of geek and working in record stores for over 30 years now, and talking about music with people all the time, just kind of led to eventually I had a website where I was doing album reviews and concert reviews and stuff. And then I had written a lengthy, I was writing like a lot of articles too and just publishing them myself online. And then a good friend of mine just suggested, there's enough knowledge, there's enough detail in some of these articles, you could put them all together and make a book out of them. So I looked around for some different artists, took a walk through the collection back there, and There had never been a book about Nazareth at that point, so that was my first book. And my two criteria are always, it's got to be an artist or an act that I can listen to for like 2 years straight, because I'm going to have to go so deep into everything that they've ever done, but also one that I might think that there's a market for. So, for example, like I love Bob Dylan and I love Miles Davis. Those are like my two top guys. I don't think I could ever write a book about either of them because there's already hundreds out there. Maybe you could, if you could come up with a good take.
Sure, keep an angle.
So with Nazareth, it seemed like there was a void that maybe could be filled. My next book then about Cheap Trick. At that point, there had only been one book about Cheap Trick, and it had been out of print for quite a bit, called Reputation is a Fragile Thing by my friend Mike Hayes. So, and then with my third book for the Guess Who, same thing. Like there had only ever been one book called American Woman by John Einerson, who's a Winnipeg music historian. And his book had been out of print since like 97 or something, like a really long time, or I don't know exactly how long. But so in all those cases, there was a void, I thought. And with Stevie, it's the same thing. I mean, there's only really one book about him, and it's his autobiography. And that's very different from my book.
Yeah.
My book really builds on his autobiography, just like I think my book really builds on the documentary. If somebody doesn't know hardly anything about Stevie and they watch the documentary, they're going to learn a ton of stuff. But then if they want to go deeper, that's where Solidarity Forever comes in, because I take a lot of the points that they touch on briefly in the documentary, because they only have 2.5 hours, and then I just dive right in on any of those kind of things.
Yeah. So I mean, I look at your canon, and Cheap Trick, Guess Who, there's similarities there as far as guitar pop and some power popish and some nice ballads and things, and even Stevie Van Zandt with his love of garage rock and things. But for me, Nazareth kind of threw me a curveball, because that band, to me at least, is far on the other side of the spectrum is from Cheap Trick and Guess Who. But I'm obviously going to think you grew up being a big Nazareth fan, and
I grew up kind of in the late 70s, and Nazareth were always really big in Canada for in the 70s and early 80s. Canada was like their biggest market. So I grew up hearing Love Hurts and This Flight Tonight on Canadian radio, probably as much as I heard These Eyes and American Woman, and I Want You to Want Me and Surrender. Like Nazareth were just really a big part of it.
It's amazing how they're best known for a song they didn't write. I mean, there are other people, and Nilsson would be another one. And in both cases, between Nazareth and Nilsson, they were songwriters. They wrote their own stuff, but somehow they ended up having a hit with songs that other people wrote.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Regarding Burton Cummings, did you get to see his record collection? Because what I've heard is it's absolutely massive.
When I was writing, no, he lives in like Western Canada now. So I did interview him quite a few times for my book, but I've not been to his house. No, but yeah, you're right. He's kind of known for a huge record collection, huge comic book collection.
Oh, really?
He's got a bunch of pinball machines, and yeah, he's a.
Yeah. So, going through all the Stevie Van Zandt book, I have to admit I did not read the Cheap Trick, Nazareth, and Guess Who books. They're on my bucket list now, but you title those The Listener's Guide to. What's the difference between The Listener's Guide to and Solidarity Forever, which really gets into Stevie's, the minutia of his entire career across the board. So if people buy the Stevie book and they love it for what it is, what's the difference between that book and The Listener's Guide, so to speak?
So The Listener's Guide, the idea was that each chapter is a separate album, and I just go through the recording and singles and whatever. And that seemed to work really well, especially for maybe the first two books. By the time I got to the Guess Who book, I started thinking that subtitle just might be a little limiting, that some people seem to be referring to the books occasionally as almost like a pamphlet or something, not quite a real book, like a listener's guide. I just started feeling a little uncomfortable with the term. And with the Guess Who book, I talked to more people in the band and around the band than I had in the previous 2 books. So I felt I was going a little deeper. I still never go into like personal details about, going to AA or groupies and ex-wives and, crashing hotel rooms, all that kind of gossip stuff. I never go into that because I don't care about that kind of stuff. My books are really deep dives into the music. But with the Guess Who book, because I talked to so many other people, I felt it was kind of a little broader than just what the term listener's guide was giving me. And with the Stevie book, then I just made that decision to just do away with that altogether. And then it doesn't seem so weird when I talk about his wedding, for example. But then again, his wedding had a lot of great musical guests, so it still ties into my music kind of focus. But I just thought the listener's guide term was a little limiting, and I wanted to be able to talk about anything that I want to talk about in a Stevie, book. I mean, after this, I don't think there'll probably ever be another Stevie book, so I want to cover everything.
I want to just pop that up right there. We're going to talk about it a little bit, but there's the title, Solidarity Forever, with
really nice
fantastic photo of Stevie and all the purple design. I love it. I absolutely love it. But,
how easy was it? It must have been a challenge, I would think, to be able to get Stevie to cooperate with the book like this, and because he's not the most approachable guy in the world.
Well, I've known him for a few years, and he's known of me for a few years. I do have a credit in his box set when they were looking for some information about his discography, and I was asked a couple of things while he was writing his autobiography. There was a couple of things he couldn't quite remember, so somebody on his team would reach out to me and ask questions. So I've kind of been in the orbit for quite a while. I first met him in 1984. Not that I would expect him to remember that. But actually, when I pitched it to him, he immediately was on board. That was not difficult at all. And I kind of thought I had a whole fight planned on my side of, well, if he says this, then I'm going to say this, and I'm going to prove this, and instead I gave him like a 2-minute pitch, and right away he said, okay, what do you need from me?
Wow.
So I did do it face to face. He was playing a show in Red Bank, New Jersey, which is actually where that photo comes from.
Yep.
My friend Ken Lesnick took that photo, and I'm standing right next to him while he took that. We were at the show. And so backstage, I met Stevie, and that was my chance to pitch him. And immediately he was on board. And I think how I got him was I told him that it was going to be a deep dive. I'm going to look at every album. I'm going to look at all the singles. I'm going to look at stuff that he produced, stuff he wrote for other people. And then I mentioned a band from Boston that he sang a duet on their album in 1985. And he said, who the fuck is that? So he didn't remember the band. He didn't remember the album. He didn't remember the song. And I said, well, you're going to have to read the book then.
I love it.
Which band was it, by the way?
It's a great.
You have to read the book.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's actually, it's a great question, David. And Robert can text you via Facebook the answer, but I think that leaves people hanging a little bit. If you want to know who Stevie duetted on from a band in Boston, 1985, but doesn't remember, go out and buy the book Solidarity Forever.
There we go. That's how we're doing it.
That's how we're doing it. Hey, we're here to help. We're here to help. But there's a number.
My first connection to Stephen was through Southside Johnny. I didn't meet him at the time, but I saw Southside Johnny play 4 different shows in the late 70s, which for me was, even though I run a music festival now, back then in the 70s, I rarely went to shows because whatever extra money I had went to records. My philosophy is, what do I want to see a band live when I can get their record? But Southside Johnny was so compelling that I ended up seeing them 4 times. And what amazing songs Stephen wrote for them. Really unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. There are things in your book too, Robert, that as you said, Stevie didn't even remember or realize, probably many of them. One thing that I thought was very cool was that that early photo of Stephen playing guitar, and he said he definitely was not a guitar player at that early age, but there he is holding a guitar. And I think you mentioned something about the fact he doesn't even remember if he knew any chords at that point or why he was holding the guitar.
That's right. Yeah, so when we did our interviews via Zoom. We did 2 for a total of about 4 hours. And when we did our first one, and he was pretty loose. He was just like, hey, what do you want to talk about? And I started off our chat by showing him this photo to kind of just show him the level of research that I was doing. And that did blow him away. Because, from when this photo was taken, he couldn't believe that he was playing guitar yet. He didn't remember being with these people. I will say that I never begrudge any of these musicians, especially these older guys who don't remember the minutia of their career. I never have a problem with that. To me, their job is to create the art and to promote it and to tour it, perform it, and do all those kinds of things. That's their job. Their job isn't necessarily to know what every song of which album was on and all that kind of stuff. If you're Steve Earle or Elvis Costello, then you know that kind of stuff. But a lot of these guys, they don't know, and they don't need to know. So I have no problem if I'm asking a guy who's in his early 70s and he started playing music when he was like 14, that he's not going to remember a bunch of stuff. So anytime that I ask a question and a musician just says, wow, that was a long time ago, I'm not sure, I move on. I got no problem with that. Sometimes I'm shocked at the stuff that they do remember, because I expect them to remember nothing. Yeah. So with Stevie, I knew that, we were going to be touching on some stuff, but there were some great moments too where I would mention something and he would kind of think about it and go, yeah, that's right. That was that guy's name, or that is where I went, or something. And he had some questions for me about his own discography, which was cool too, that I was able to tell him right away what the B-side of something was. And he would just go, huh, you don't say. Okay.
Yeah, we've had many musicians as guests on our shows, and it's true. Sometimes they remember the most random stuff, and stuff that was considered to be more important, even signposts of their careers, they don't remember. The other thing that I'm sure Mark notices this too, is a lot of the people from back in the day, they're shocked that anyone even remembers them, period. Even if they had top 10 hits, if they haven't been played on the radio recently, they think everyone's forgotten them. Where in fact, there's some of these people have huge fan groups.
And the other thing too is, back with a number of the artists that we've talked to and interviewed from the 60s and the early 70s, asking them about how that moment started. Well, they didn't know that was going to be a moment, so they weren't writing notes and archiving everything that they were doing. It happened, and then they were running with it, and then 2 years later it was this and that, and now 45, 50 years later we're asking them, well, how did you get your record deal exactly? And I swear half the time they just make stuff up, and we're like, oh, was that easy? Yeah, as far as I remember, we just walked in and handed them a tape, and but they weren't archiving things as they were going along.
And
Stevie's career, massive in many different directions, with so many things. One of the things I found interesting is when you talked about, Springsteen was actually in Stevie's band or early band. It wasn't, everybody, I think if you're not close to it, everybody would automatically think, well, Springsteen was Springsteen and he brought Stevie along. Well, it was quite the opposite there for a little bit, because they all kind of played in each other's bands in New Jersey.
I was shocked to see how many bands Stevie was in prior to his fame. I mean, holy crap, so many.
Yeah, well, it's like there was a core group of Bruce, Steven, Gary Talent, Southside Johnny, and these guys would, in Steven's book, he says that they would change the name of the band every 2 weeks. And so what I did, I actually made a kind of family tree just for myself, so I could keep track of everything. And you could just see it happening. So at one point there's a group, and Steven's on lead vocals and Bruce is on guitar, and then it's Gary and like Danny Federici, And then like the next week, the name of the band changes, and now Bruce is on lead vocals, and Steven is just playing guitar. And then maybe they switch one guy out or something. But basically, yeah, Steven, Bruce, and Gary Talent, and Danny Federici, those four guys, they all start kind of together. And really where it all stems from a club in back then called the Upstage. So they would have these jam sessions where teenagers could go because it was a non-alcohol venue, and they'd have these jam sessions, but guys like Steven and Bruce, they got to lead the jam sessions. So they were actually, and they got paid just $5 a night or something for it. So they got to do a little bit. So their stature in the scene was a little higher, but for sure Bruce and Steven are peers in those early years. Absolutely, they're trading lead vocals, they're trading lead guitar, and yeah, they're in each other's bands constantly. You can find like ads and stuff online where Steven is like the opening act for Bruce and vice versa. Sure. Or both their bands are playing like Battle of the Bands, like in 1965 when Bruce was with the Castiles and Steven's with the Shadows, and he had a group called The Source. So you can actually find these ads where you see that history, that they have been together for a really, really long time as peers.
Can you imagine writing something like this pre-internet, though, with the information that you've been able to, I'm sure, source via the internet?
Well, not only that, but between different social media platforms, it's also easier to reach out to some of these people, especially when you're dealing with guys who are a little bit older. If somebody was in a band with Steven in like the early 70s or the late 60s, and maybe he's out there somewhere and he might still have a bit of a music thing, but how would you get a hold of him if he didn't have a Facebook page, or if he wasn't on LinkedIn or something? He could just be doing acoustic sets somewhere, whoever you might be talking about. So that is true.
Yeah,
I would say, Mark, that probably any of my books, but especially this one and the Guess Who book, without social media and being able to just reach out to either ex-managers, or like I had two guys for this band, for this book, that I really wanted involved. And one is a guy who played with Steven, but he also played with, he was in the Asbury Jukes for a long time, named Rusty Cloud. So he's a keyboardist, and he used to play with Gary U.S. Bonds before that. And another guy is Jean Beauvoir, who was with Steven for his first two albums. And I really wanted both of those guys involved. I think it took me like a year and a half to get a hold of Rusty.
Wow.
Like he's alive, he's out there, but it was just really, he's not on Twitter or Facebook or anything. And every once in a while I'd say, okay, I'm doing this. And then I couldn't do it. And then I would try again 6 months later. And eventually I find that he teaches music, that he gives classes, but it wasn't under his name or anything. I had to like kind of go through his wife's name or something.
So you called and booked an appointment with him to learn guitar, and
yeah. And once I got my foot in the door, then it was all over.
No, I'll give you although this isn't a major name band, I'll give you another example of that. There's a band I just discovered a couple of weeks about a month ago, called The Dress Rehearsal. I heard their record. They're from the UK, and I really loved it. And I remember finding out the name of the main guy and looking for him on Facebook, and I couldn't find him. And I then did a Google search, and I couldn't find him there either. Then finally, on the second page of this Google search, there was a Facebook post from his uncle who had seen him play, his band, The Dress Rehearsal, play at a wedding that the uncle attended. So I reached out to the uncle, told him who I was and why I wanted to contact his nephew. And it was only through that I was able to get a hold. So it's amazing how you may not be able to find the person directly. And I'm sure this happened with you a few times, but you find somebody who knows that person and you get to them that way. But sometimes it's the most bizarre ways.
I had a few people who were very. This happened with the Guess Who book a little bit too. Few people were like, "Well, hold on, is Steven involved? Because if Steven's not involved, then I'm not doing it."
Yeah.
And I hadn't reached out to Steven, and I didn't want to reach out to Steven until the book was almost done. You know, because as I go through the chapters, as I'm writing them, that's when I'm building my questions for him.
Sure.
So like when I first started the book, people would say like, "Oh, did you interview him yet?" Well, no, because I'm not there yet. I need, and I want questions for every chapter so I can get input from him on every chapter. So until the book is almost completely done, to me, there's no point in talking to Steven. I also didn't know how much time I would have with Steven. I definitely wasn't guessing that I would have almost 4 hours.
Yeah.
So there was a few guys who were like, "No, I don't know, unless Steven says." And then as soon as when I pitched it to him in Red Bank, New Jersey, of course I got a picture with him, and I was able to say, you know, "Look who's on board with the Steven book" on my social media. So right away, these guys were like, "Okay, what do you need to know?" So a lot of guys fell in line immediately once they knew that Steven was part of it.
I just want to pop this picture up. That's is that Stevie signing the book for you, or is he circling things he wants changed? And are those all your relatives behind you on the wall?
That is just from a couple months ago when the E Street Band were in Toronto. So I was presenting him with his own personal copy of the book. I sent him a PDF earlier, but yeah, that's him signing my copy. Nice. Backstage about 20 minutes before he's about to go on with the E Street Band.
I love it. I love it. That's good. I want to talk about, you kind of briefly touched on it here, but your process whenever you decided you were going to do this Stevie Van Zandt book. So I understand, you know, getting all the chapters written as much as possible because you didn't want to waste a lot of time. So how did you then approach what you were going to ask Stevie? Did you have just a checklist for each part of the chapter and say, answer this, answer this, answer this? And how did you come to put all this? It really is, I call it a massive tome, but anybody that buys this book, it really covers everything about Stevie Van Zandt. I mean, there's a lot. So
well, there would be
your process. Yeah.
There would be some questions I would kind of know ahead of time, but then and this is why I can't interview him until I write the book. New things come up, like things that I never kind of realized as I'm writing, as I'm researching, I start to see that maybe something doesn't quite make sense the way that I thought it did, or something didn't happen in the order that I thought it did. So there could be established questions that are just like basic things of, you know, like a big moment. In 1983, his band, the Disciples of Soul, played the US Festival in the States, which was a big, you know, millions of people, like the biggest audience they ever played for. So I knew that was something I wanted to talk to him about. So that's over there. But then as I'm writing, you know, kind of new things come up. And as I go deeper, I know that there's a very good chance I'm not going to get answers to some of this stuff, but I'm going to ask as much as I can. And after we did the first Zoom interview, which was over 2 hours, then I went over everything again, looked at everything that he'd given me, typed it all up, popped it in the different parts of the manuscript where they had to go. And then I read the whole thing from beginning to end again. And then all of a sudden new questions come up. So when I reached out to him to do the follow-up interview, he just goes, "What's left?" And I said, "Well, I got a couple things, actually. There's a few things I'm kind of curious about." One thing that I really enjoyed, and I think it's a real strong point of the book, is that, you know, I would just read the book constantly as I'm writing it, and I'm editing, and I'm sending it to friends who are proofreading it for me. And then as I'm talking to people, I add those quotes in the appropriate spaces. So you got guys who, you know, the Miami Horns, and you got different people who played. So the whole book at that point is me talking about his music, and then every once in a while you get a little anecdote from a musician who used to be in his band or somebody. And I was feeling really good about the book. Then I did that first Zoom with Steven, and once I put those quotes in there, it really changed the whole tone of the thing, because now you have me talking about something, and then maybe the trumpet player mentions something, and maybe the bass player mentions something, but then Stevie responds. And in some cases, I would tell him what the previous people told me, and he's kind of responding to that. There's a great moment in the chapter about his 1985 album called Sun City, where I talked to his co-producer, Arthur Baker, who was great. And then I went back and talked to Steven and brought up some of the things that Arthur said. So in that part of the book, it actually looks like they're talking to each other, because they are responding to the things that the guy said previously, and they go back and forth a little bit. And I just think when you read that part, it's really, really interesting, and it created this new kind of energy that didn't exist before. So having Steven on board isn't just about picking his brain and getting information. It really changed the whole tone and the flavor of the book. And there's a few moments when that kind of thing happened, where even not necessarily with him, just with two guys, I talked to two different roadies of Stevens, and there's a point in 83 where they're both talking about something, and again, it looks like they're talking to each other, almost like they're in the room with me, and they're not. But I think that really elevated kind of just the whole feel of the book. And that's another, what I was saying about not having the listener's guide tag. I didn't want anything to limit this book. I wanted this book to have everything that it could, and I wanted to get out to as many people as possible. I don't want people to think it's too nerdy, but then people who want it to be nerdy, it's got a lot of that too.
Oh, sure.
Do you like me feel that Men Without Women is a very underrated album? And what does Stevie think of it in the scope of his career?
Men Without Women is the greatest album ever created.
There you go.
He's not shy.
He's I mean, that's and I told him that. He goes, it's pretty good. Yeah, we did some good things on that one. I'm the kind of guy for years. It's like, if you ask me what's my favorite album of all time, like, that's a ridiculous question. Like, how could there ever be one? I've got thousands of CDs and records. It's like, that's an insane question. And I don't know if it was like 5 or 6 years ago or something, I realized, no, there is an answer to that. For me, it is Men Without Women.
Wow.
Men Without Women is, I probably own like 20 different copies of it from different countries.
Holy cow.
And different pressings.
I love that.
But I have a lot of copies of almost all of his albums. So
tell me what you don't have of Men Without Women, and if I ever go to one of those countries, I'll try to find it for you.
Yeah, right. I'll make you a list. There might be a couple. I showed him some of that stuff. That was the great thing about doing Zoom. If I was meeting him in a hotel, I wouldn't be able to bring my whole collection with me or something. So I had a whole bunch of stuff stacked around me, like here. And I was able to show him stuff that he'd never seen before. I have an Argentina pressing of his third album. Wow. That one of the songs is sung in Spanish by him. And it's not like that on any other pressing of that album.
Wow.
So he had no idea about that.
Oh,
but he remembered that he sang it in Spanish, but he actually didn't remember that it had ever actually come out on anything. So
right.
Well, he seems very self-effacing in many ways, and he seems like a kind of guy that really doesn't consciously harp on everything he's done in his past. He's always about what he's doing now and what he can make happen in the future. So even when I've talked to him and then I've seen some interviews on he's always just kind of so squeezing a little bit of information out of him was probably a little tough nut to crack, I would think. But I think also what was interesting is that it's not like you were ghostwriting his autobiography and talking to him for 25, 30 hours trying to get everything. You had already done a mass amount of research. I mean, obviously you were a giant fan from the beginning, but the amount of research with everything through Stevie's career that you did and put on paper first, it's quite impressive.
I have this filing cabinet, and
nice.
This is
that's the A section.
Yeah, it's not just Steven. I'm not that crazy, but it's a lot of just like, if I read a great review in a Mojo or in a Rolling Stone, and it's somebody that I care about, it goes in the filing cabinet. Now there is a lot of stuff about Steven in here, so there was a lot of raw data that I already had, but I don't know what's a so there's a Hendrix folder.
Okay. All right.
All right. So any, Hendrix reviews or whatever. So I got a lot of that kind of stuff nearby, real close. So having all that raw data already was probably, and that's one of the reasons why I thought, well, this might be a pretty easy book to put together, because I've compiled all this stuff. Like, I don't know when it was exactly, like 30 years ago or something. I did this. I had a lot more spare time on my hands, I guess. I went through this thing. I used to collect a lot of bootleg cassettes. So live recordings of bands, and I used to tape trade with people and stuff. So one year or one summer, I went through and I listened to every Little Steven bootleg that I had on cassette, or a Southside Johnny bootleg if Steven was with him, or an E Street Band bootleg if something notable with Steven happened. And I wrote a little mini review of each one. So there's some Southside show in '77 where Steven does 2 duets or something. I'll just write a little thing about what songs they were, how it was, what they did. And so I had like 15 pages of that already. And a lot of that I was able to just transfer straight into the book, because I still have those cassettes, but I don't necessarily, play those formats anymore. But I was able to see what I wrote about a bootleg from 1983 that I sort of reviewed just for myself 30 years ago. And in some cases, I would re-listen to it and just see if those notes still kind of add up, or if I need to add anything else to it, or, anything like that. So that was another example of something that was a gift that I guess I gave myself from 30 years ago. There was no point for me to write those mini reviews of every Little Steven bootleg cassette that I had, but they sure came in handy.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. Oh my gosh.
What's one thing that, when people read the book, what's one thing that'll probably surprise people the most about Little Steven?
Probably just how prolific he's been. Like when he gets interviewed by mainstream kind of media and TV, he'll talk about before Sopranos and before the E Street Band reunion that he basically retired. He always says, I walked my dog for 10 years and I didn't do anything. So in my book, I list that he was doing tons of stuff during that time, but it was all production for other people. At one point, he went out on the road with Bon Jovi, and he was opening for them with Jean Beauvoir's band, and then he would join Bon Jovi every night for the encores. So he wasn't quite the hermit that he kind of makes it seem to be. I mean, maybe it felt like that to him because he wasn't doing Little Steven records.
Yeah.
So putting that together, it was kind of an important thing for me. Talking to him about working with Bob Dylan and the Sun City album and all that kind of stuff is really important too, because I definitely meet people and I hear from people who don't know how deep his career goes, and they don't know that he's one of the first guys who was working on like Lone Justice, Maria McKee albums, and that there's a lot of guys out there who love the first album by Archangels, and they don't really realize that he produced it. Yeah. And like, you said originally, David, his influence on those first 3 Southside Johnny albums, those are practically Steve Van Zandt albums.
Yeah.
For the amount of singing that he does on them, the amount of writing and the amount of guitar playing, he's all over those records. Those are really the template for Men Without Women.
And I have to say, as a Southside Johnny fan, after those 3 albums, I mean, it seemed like the band decided, well, you know what? We don't need outside writers. We can write our own stuff. No, they couldn't. No. Not even close. And when the 1991 Southside album came out, I was so thrilled to see Steven back on the writing track. And man, that was just like the first 3 albums. Wonderful.
Yeah, and that was great, as not only a reunion between Southside and Steven, that they were back together, but they brought back so many of the other guys. Like I mentioned, Rusty Cloud on keyboards, he's back on that album. And then the horn guys, Mark Pender, Stan Harrison, Eddie Mannion, Richie Rosenberg, all those guys came back. Gary Talent and Max Weinberg are the rhythm section on that album. So, who, not Max, but Gary, like I said previously, started all those years ago with those guys. So there are some really great Southside Johnny albums out there, but the first three and then the 1991 Better Days album, those are the top, easily. Those are the top.
Oh, indeed. I think that that's what most people, if they are casual fans of Stevie's, if they're fans of the Underground Garage and they know all about Stevie and everything he's done with that, I think that's what they'll be impressed with most about this book is just the scope of everything he's done. And again, as I said, you've covered it all. And obviously there's going to have to be an addendum in 10 years because you're going to have to cover the next 10 years after that because Stevie's not done yet. He keeps cooking and he keeps rolling right along. But what a guy. I mean, he's been, I think you probably know the connection for me and Stevie with the Underground Garage. He's been a giant supporter of mine. He made Pop Detective Records just by, playing all my artists. I've had 18 coolest songs in the world on my label and 2 coolest songs of the year. And he's been a fantastic supporter. I can't thank him enough. I mean, we did have one 6-month period where we didn't like each other for a little bit because he wanted to edit one of my artists' tracks for a coolest song, and it was a horrible edit. And I told him, no, you can't do that. And he came back and he said, I've edited Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, Mick Jagger, all this. I've edited all these people. And you're telling me I can't edit your song? Like,
right.
No, you can't. And then he didn't talk to me for like 6 months.
Wow.
And then I got invited up to the Hard Rock Cafe for the 10th anniversary of Underground Garage. And he came up to me in his way and just kind of was like, with that head bobbing. He goes, I respect him.
I've only met him twice. One time he came to one of my International Pop Overthrow shows to see a band that we were showcasing, the Anderson Council.
Yeah.
But the other time I tried to get close to him and a guy who was acting as his bodyguard, like wouldn't let me or anybody else get near him. What I found that kind of curious. Why did he feel like he needed a bodyguard?
Well, you, Dave.
I
wasn't there. I don't know.
Depends on what shirt you were wearing that night, David.
Maybe that was it.
Yeah, you were up.
Paisley shirts scared him off.
You didn't want to. You were going to upstage him with your.
Yeah, exactly. They have a very similar fashion sense.
I don't wear a bandana though. So.
Hey, you have a bowler hat. That's your.
So it wasn't. So he didn't have a bodyguard as a steady thing. It was just maybe for that one situation, because it was at the Viper Room, which, as you may know, in LA, the Viper Room is really small, so it doesn't take much to fill it. And indeed, I'm trying to even remember who I saw that night, but it was someone on Wicked Cool, I guess, or someone he was championing, and it was very, very crowded. Yeah,
that might be.
Robert, do you have? I didn't put a banner up, but do you have a website to send people to find out about this stuff, or do they buy this book through the normal channels, Amazon and whatnot? What do you recommend?
Just the normal. It's on all international Amazon sites. You can also get it directly from the publisher, which is called Friesen Press. Although their shipping might be a little higher. If you have free Amazon, that probably makes the most sense. Some people contact me directly for signed copies, and I'm always happy to ship.
I'm gonna have to do that, Robert. I'm going to contact you directly. I'd like to get one like that from you as well.
So I have paperbacks and hardcovers here. Sometimes the shipping is a little, also an issue because they're coming from Canada, but we make it work.
I'm scrolling across the bottom for anybody that's watching right now and needs the full title. It is Solidarity Forever. The Art and Soul of Stevie Van Zandt.
I know I'll be buying it
and pick up a copy. If you are a huge fan of Stevie's, or if you're just a casual fan, I'm telling you, this book is quite the read, and you're going to absolutely love it. Really great work, Robert. What's coming up for you? What's on tap? That big filing cabinet. What are you thinking?
Well, there's Yeah, I don't think I'm doing really any kind of books anymore. They
Wow.
they do take a lot out of me, and something I need to learn how to deal with a little bit better is the frustration when I'm trying to promote these things. So, for example, when my Guess Who book came out, I thought, well, Canadian media are really going to be interested in this, and unfortunately, the book came out right at the beginning of the pandemic, where a lot of news channels and newspapers laid off a lot of their entertainment staff because there weren't concerts to write about, and there weren't sporting events or theater events. So the two biggest, or the pandemic was a pretty big story, so they were just kind of covering that. But that was still disappointing to me. The Stephen book I never would have imagined, but there's a bunch of Springsteen, E Street Band kind of websites and podcasts who are passing on talking about this book with me at all.
Wow.
And I never would have imagined that. Well, the reason that they all say, and it's all the same reason, which it sounds odd to hear from so many people. They go, well, we already talked about his autobiography, which came out like 5 years ago now, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And we reviewed the documentary that came out. Like, my book only came out really in the end of November of last year. So I think it's still pretty new. The documentary came out last summer. And like I said previously, even though there's some overlap with the book, and the director of the documentary, Bill Tech, he's a friend of mine. But to say that you've already reviewed the documentary, so then it would be redundant to review the book, is just incorrect. Because
what you need to do next time somebody says that to you, Robert, is say, but as Stephen says, biographies are better.
Yeah, right. Well, Stephen himself, when he signed my copy with that picture that you showed there, Mark, he actually said, like, I don't remember half of the stuff in this book. And then he contacted me a week or two later after that, and he said, change that to 75%.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That I don't know in the book. So I don't think it would be redundant for Springsteen or E Street Band podcasts or websites to talk about the documentary. And then, you could talk about the book in terms of what makes this different from the documentary or something. But just for them out of hand to say, no, we're not interested because we've already talked about Stevie, that was a rejection that I was not prepared for.
Wow.
And I think I only really talked to two different E Street Band kind of podcasts, and they were both great. And they knew their stuff, so it was cool to talk to them. There's a lot of Springsteen stuff in this book. So if you're a completist, there is stuff about Stephen working with Springsteen that a lot of people, I don't think, are really aware of. When Stephen left the E Street Band in 1984 officially, and even in both Stephen's book and in Bruce's book, they kind of make it sound like they were fighting. They were, which was true. They weren't happy with each other, but like that they didn't speak to each other or they had nothing in common anymore. And that's not true, because on the worldwide 1984-85 Born in USA tour, Stephen actually joined them for the encores 10 times.
Wow.
And in that period, you have Bruce appearing on Sun City as well, and you have Stephen appearing in the Glory Days video. So for people who maybe think there was more of a division than it really was, the book also points that kind of stuff out. Stephen has talked in the past about, in 1983, him and some friends went to Disneyland in LA, and they got kicked out because of the way that they dressed. So in my book, I point out that actually Bruce was one of those friends. Bruce was with them. So I think even if you're just like a Springsteen kind of E Street Band completist, and and you want to know that kind of stuff, like I talk about that stuff. I talk about how Bruce and Stephen worked on the Gary U.S. Bonds records together and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of Springsteen content as well for those kind of podcasts. But like I said, that was a rejection I was really not prepared for. And frankly, I'm really disappointed in that community for not wanting to talk about a book that Stephen himself says, this is a great book about my life. And he's so proud of,
You know what, Robert? Give it some time. And if you approach them again, maybe they'll be more amenable, because at that point, it will have been years since the documentary has come out and the autobiography came out. So it might work.
Well, I hope some of these people at some point, they could either look at the things that Stephen himself have said about the book. I do have some quotes from some other band members that I want to try to put together some kind of a video of, or they could just read the Amazon reviews. I mean, there's not a lot of Amazon reviews right now, but they're all 5-star, and they all kind of rave about the level of research and the level of detail that are in the book. You know, no one's, if you care about Springsteen and Steven and Gary S. Bonds and stuff like Johnny, you're not going to be bored by this book.
Yeah. Do you find it, how, we've talked to other authors on this show many times as well, but how difficult do you find it promoting and selling a book these days?
Well, the Guess Who, I mean, even though the pandemic affected my media coverage of the Guess Who book, it might have affected my sales in a positive way because everyone was stuck at home.
Right.
And when, you know, you couldn't do much except for order off Amazon and get books and stuff like that. So my Guess Who book actually made back its operating costs in the first month.
Wow.
Which was incredible for me. Because after that, then it's just fun and I don't have to worry about, you know, the costs involved. So promoting it is, it's a challenge. And
who published this book?
So the company's called Friesen Press.
Okay.
And it's like a self-publishing kind of contract that you sign with them. So the final word on everything comes back to me. So if there's anything that they suggest we should do, if I don't like that suggestion, I don't have to do it. You know, like they'll give me a whole list of things that they think would help either read better or whatever, and I can accept or I can decline. And I really like having that final word on, you know, what the finished product is going to be, because I do want to go in detail with, you know, with every one of my books. At some point, there'll be a publishing consultant who will say, do you really have to go quite that deep on the difference between, you know, 2 different extended mixes on a 12-inch from Holland? Yeah. Obviously.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, you think I'm not going to talk about that? That's the whole point.
And how did, not in any detail at all, but how did you get that deal with them? Did you sit down and say, here's what I've got, and they were just blown away by,
pardon me for 1 minute,
detail of this thing?
Well, like I said, it's a self-publishing company. So unless
it's not print on demand, because it's a well done, it's a well packaged book. It's a beautiful book. And
well, as the author, you kind of sign up for what they can give you. So if you want a better quality package, you sort of agree to a certain thing. Like my previous books, I think all 3 of my previous books had 20 interior black and white images.
Right.
This book I have 44 or 43, and most of them are in full color. So that's an example actually where the publisher said, like, are you sure you want all these pictures in color? Because that does raise the cost of the book. They have to use a slightly different kind of paper. But I mean, Steven's such a colorful guy. Like I have to.
Oh yeah. It's tough to show off Steven in his full color with that. Yeah, with a black and white photograph. It's very interesting. I'm always interested in how people are publishing things nowadays. We've got friends of ours. Ken Sharp does a lot of self-publishing with a number of books and things. And it changes over the years with how the business is run. But gosh darn it, I wish you the best with this, because I can really appreciate the work that you put into this. It's years of gathering, collecting, and then just putting it all together is a massive undertaking, and very well done. So if anybody is interested out there, just look up Solidarity Forever, The Art and Soul of Stevie Van Zandt, and purchase your copy. You will not be disappointed with it. And fantastic. Thanks for.
I'm going to be one who does order it.
Yeah.
So there you go. Even though I have the PDF, I have to have physical product. Maybe I'll just ask you as a collector, but how do you feel about albums, and I'll put it in quotes, that have digital only releases? Do you lament that? Because I know I do.
No, it's terrible, and it's something that I deal with at work all the time, because it's becoming especially more prevalent with hip hop music, where these fans come in and they want to spend money and they want to buy the new CD by whoever, and it's not necessarily an artist that I'm familiar with, but I have to tell them, like, I'm sorry, it's digital only. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I can't buy a CD? And I tell them all the time, like, hey, believe me, I would love to sell you the CD if it existed. And they don't really understand it. But it's a drag. I guess the encouraging part about it, the disappointment that I see in the faces of the customers when I have to tell them that's digital only, that shows that there still is a market for physical media.
No doubt about it.
Because they're really disappointed, So yeah, I don't buy that at all. I mean, I've got a lot of CDs. There's a whole part of this room that you can't see that has just more and more CDs and music DVDs and stuff like that. So I'm a big physical media guy, and having all my Steven stuff, collecting it for so many years, that was another example how it made it easy to write the book, because I didn't have to kind of wonder oh, I wonder what stuff's out there. It's in here. There's only a couple of Steven items that I don't have already, so that helped. But no, I mean, to your original question, digital only releases, I don't know, unless they're just maybe a temporary thing to test the market or something. I don't know. I mean, CDs cost, like $1 to produce or something like that. And I think as long as people are listening to CDs and they're listening to vinyl, that people will still be buying physical media.
It just gets, we talk about the CD stuff all the time, but it just gets a little more difficult as the years go by with having access to things that play CDs. Every car now, I think they just stopped putting CD players in your cars. Yeah. So, you need to somehow, and I know I've probably bought 4. I do have a CD player in my stereo system. I probably bought 4 interesting portable CD players over the last couple of years just to make sure that 20 years from now I still have a portable CD player that's going to work to play all my CDs. I get this
still find some audio stores that will install a CD player for you, but even they're getting few and far between. Robert, I wanted to ask you something about the Guess Who, because you might need to write an addendum about that, given the the acrimony between certain members when another certain member decided to use the name. And I want to tell you, I love the Guess Who. My favorite album by the original Guess Who is Canned Wheat. But I have to say, Plain d'Amour, I think it's awesome. I don't care what name they put it under. It reminds me of Jellyfish. It reminds me of Klaatu, a band I'm sure you know well. Indeed. It's great. I mean...
it's been reissued now under a different band name, so you can.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh wow!
Oh, now I'm gonna have to find it.
Yeah, I don't know what it's like. Derek Sharp and the.
Oh damn!
The Sharpettes or something.
The Sharp Tones.
Yeah, the Sharp Tones. So what's the question, David?
No, it was no question. I was saying you're probably going to need to write an addendum to that book because of all the stuff that's happened, between the members and all the acrimony and the lawsuits and the whole bit.
Well, I think it's resolved now. So I don't know what the next chapter is going to. In the career, I don't know what's going to happen, but at least that legal battle is over.
Oh, okay, good.
Well, I hope. I hope everything goes very well with this book. I think it's one of these books that will do well as time marches on here, because people will start realizing that it's really worth it. But I also hope that you continue and do more in the future, because you're good at it. You're very good at it, my friend. And
appreciate that.
And
just a little bit I was able to read. I have to concur.
Music,
and, as a fan of any band, the minutia is very important to me.
Sure.
That's great. Well, my friends, that's been Robert Lawson here on Material Issues. We're scrolling across the bottom again. His relatively new book out, I guess November, he said it was. Solidarity Forever, The Art and Soul of Stevie Van Zandt. Man, it truly could be subtitled Everything You Wanted and Maybe Did Not Want to Know About Stephen Van Zandt. His entire career is in this book, and it is quite the career. So
everything you wanted to know about Stevie Van Zandt, but we're afraid to ask.
Afraid to ask, right?
Because he's on The Sopranos, so you think he's gonna have you axed.
And Lilyhammer, one of my bands was on Lilyhammer as well, so that's another connection I have with
What
him.
about everything you wanted to know about Stevie that he can't tell you himself?
There you go. At least 75% of the book. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well, Robert, best of luck with everything. Thank you so much for hanging out here with us on Material Issues. And I'll be in contact soon because I want to pick up a copy directly from you.
I really hope to meet you in November in Toronto.
Oh, there's your buddy, Bob Reed, checking in.
Oh, there he is.
Good to see you, Bob.
Thanks for joining us, Bob.
All right. Thank you, Robert. Have a great night. We'll talk to you real soon.
All right, guys. Thanks for everything.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.
Very cool.
Robert Lawson. What a fun interview that was, and what a great book he has put together. Just incredible. And I thought I knew a lot about Stevie Van Zandt just through my connections with him, but I didn't even know a drop in the bucket.
Right.
It's a great book, and I hope everybody watching tonight and everybody who will watch in the archives, which is always out there at materialissues.com. I hope you pick it up. It really is worth your time and money for this book. Fantastic book. But great, another great episode number 189 as we march slowly towards number 200, which blows my mind.
We'll get there in 11 weeks, more than likely.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
It's crazy. I don't know how this even happened ourselves, but it's been awesome. What do we got coming up, my friend? I think we got somebody next week that we're all excited about.
Yeah, somebody next week who, although we don't really know him as an author, is one now.
Yeah,
the book. Pardon?
I just got the book.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
We've known him for his music for many, many years, and of course his album P. Huck's Deluxe is a big favorite of a lot of power pop fans. But he's released a lot more records, and not just under his own name, but he's been part of Electric Light Orchestra Part 2, and has written a book about that and other things in his life called Electric Light Odyssey, and My Zigzag Life, and the iconic band that changed everything.
Yep.
And so we're really happy that we will be having Parthenon Huxley as our guest next week on Material Issues. I'm sure it'll be a fine interview.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Very much so. And then after that, it's kind of wide open. We're starting to talk to more people. I've got some more interest here and there. So you never know who's going to pop up on Material Issues.
We never know.
We never know. We go, oh, we're wide open. Then all of a sudden we book the next 5 weeks in a row, and
right.
So we always have irons in the fire. We always have great things going on. So, if you haven't subscribed over at materialissues.com, do that. We drop an email out on Monday or Tuesday, let you know what's coming up on Wednesday of that week, just so you can tune in if you feel like it or watch the archives. But we appreciate your support. We
very
love
much so,
because we archive people's stories, and we talk about some new things that are happening like this Stevie Van Zandt book. So if you dig it, we dig it. We're having a good time. We thank everybody that hangs out with us. And
absolutely.
Stay tuned. But you have a great night, David. Love to Rena, as always.
Love to Ches. And everyone, thanks so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your week and weekend. And we hope to see you next week.
All right. Take care, everybody. Night.
Good night.